Here on the ground, change happens fast. Problems feel frequent and urgent. It's loud and anxiety runs high. From a satellite view, the Earth looks the same as it did thousands of years ago. We've been here before. Let's learn from our past and shoot for a better future.
Hello and welcome to this episode of A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mikkelson, your host, speaking at you from Sunday, October 29th, 2023, in the space and time continuum. Again, a very jam-packed week of craziness. I do have my Cassidy Hutchinson book here. I did bring it down to the table like I said I was going to do in the last episode because I kept saying I was going to point some things out that are crazy stories from that book. And I got a little Post-it notes on pages here, ready to go with that as well. But first, we're going to go way back in history to the 1100s. You may have heard of a guy named Thomas Becket. He was the Archbishop of Canterbury. He lived from 1120 to 1170. Many people say he divided England in a way that even many churchmen who shared some of his views thought unnecessary and self-indulgent. He's remained both a figure of inspiration and devotion and detestation. Some say he was the founder of jester politics, with the most acute of eye for what could now be called the photo op. He was also the master of the sound bite, many people say. Sound like he drank a lot. He said that wine was better for his stomach than water, so he drank a lot of wine. Some people kind of think he was a wino. Some people think he was sort of fraudulently in the church. He was also greedy. In 1164, he was brought to trial, in part on charges of embezzlement during his time as royal chancellor, the position he held before he became Archbishop of Canterbury. Archbishop of Canterbury. The wealth of Thomas and his following by the 1150s was immense and famous. How did he assemble such wealth? Presumably by profiting from his position in the royal administration. Does that sound familiar? In 1170, there were three bishops, or I don't know much about the Catholic Church hierarchy. The story goes there were three entities from the church that were going to go and crown King Henry II. And Thomas Becket had them discommunicated. How do you call it? Uncommunicated? Kicked out of the church. And so then they couldn't do this crowning of the king. And the story goes, King Henry II said something that encouraged some of his followers to murder Thomas Becket. The line has been disputed exactly what it is, but it's mostly known as being, "Will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest?" That was said by King Henry II.
Maybe at a rally or something. I'm King Henry II. I'm the best king, your favorite king.
Will nobody rid me of this meddlesome priest? And within a few days, that priest was dead, murdered. Forwarding to just last Thursday, 4 days ago, I'm going to read to you from a new issue given to Judge Chunkin. They're saying we need to up this gag order on King Henry II. No, Donald Trump, of course. I'm going to read from it, and they quote what Judge Chunkin said when she issued the gag order, a month ago. I'm going to read to you from this motion. As the court explained, targeted disparagement of this sort can pose a real danger, even when it does not explicitly call for harassment or violence, as repeated attacks on a perceived adversary are often understood as a signal to act against that person, much like King Henry II's famous remark in reference to Archbishop Thomas Becket, "Will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest?" which resulted in Becket's murder.
You got a nice wife. I would hate for something bad to happen to her. Michael Cohen is a thug. Michael Cohen is a menace. He shouldn't even be allowed to speak.
You know, things like that. Michael Cohen himself said he talked like a mob boss. He wouldn't tell you to change the numbers. He just would say, I'm not worth $6 billion this year. I'm worth $8 billion. And then we knew to go change the numbers. He didn't actually tell us to change the numbers in so many words. He just, he talks like a mob boss. He hints at it to cover himself. So Trump is saying Cohen has a terrible record. The only reason Cohen, because he was thrown in jail. He did that for you, you idiot. Michael Cohen would not have gone to jail if he wasn't doing what you wanted him to do. So his terrible record basically is your terrible record, idiot. He's saying things about Mark Meadows that's very much like a mob boss, like.
I know some people would plead guilty. I wonder which one he is. Those people are cowards. I'm sure Mark Meadows is not a coward. Well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to see.
All these people have to get an immense amount of security for their families and for themselves. Jack Smith is spending tons of money, of our taxpayer money, because of Trump. Jack Smith has to have an immense amount of security, both for him and his family. People are hiring security for their kids' schools because of mob boss Trump hinting about these people. And then his crazy, idiotic followers who don't seem to mind spending time in prison for him will go out and do it. Some of these people are losing their lives. The guy who shot up the FBI shop in Colorado or something, he ended up getting shot by the police and died. He shot up the FBI because Trump said,
the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago. They just came in and raided me.
And it's not just that. I want to play for you part of his speech. It's not part of his speech. It's just him ad-libbing, off script at one of his stupid rallies. This was in New Hampshire. Maybe a week and a half ago. Listen to this.
When I did something to Iran and they shot missiles, well, those are typically accurate missiles, but did you notice every single one of them missed, right? I wonder why they missed. I wonder why they missed. They went at a certain base that we had, a lot of people in that base, but they all landed a little outside the base. I wonder why. Someday you're going to think about that. Then you're going to think about, did we know they weren't going to hit the base too? But they didn't hit us. They needed some kind of reply, I guess, but they didn't hit us.
He is talking about highly classified information there. Why? Why would he do it? He's just trying to show off.
Yeah, I know things you don't know. They told me a lot of things.
And is he testing the water here? It seems like he wants somebody to throw himself in jail so he can be a martyr. A lot of people thought Thomas Becket was a bad guy, greedy, corrupt. He was a martyr to a lot of people, and they kind of worshipped him. I mean, almost to the point of making him sort of a deity. At least in the Catholic Church, he was admired that way. History, there's people on both sides of that. It makes it interesting to wonder where Trump is going to fall in history. There will probably be some people who think, I don't know, he kept saying he was the best president ever. Maybe he was. I could see there being stories like that in, 100 years, 200 years. But he's not as smart as Thomas Becket. You wonder about people in history from the past. There were a lot of people who hated Abraham Lincoln. He was hated because he was a liberal, and the conservatives hated his guts. And there are still people in the South who think he was the worst president ever. So I'm sure there will be some people who think Trump was the best president ever. But Trump isn't as smart as Abraham Lincoln, so he just looks like an idiot. When people get separated from him and they watch some of these videos of him trying to talk, I think they're just going to say, this guy was president? No way. What? No possible way. So yeah, he's on the verge of exposing top secret information just when he's speaking at his rally. He really needs to be thrown in jail. He needs to be stifled. Now, I'm not a mob boss saying that he needs to be stifled, insinuating that somebody should harm him. I'm saying he needs to get thrown in jail. They need to revoke the conditions of release, to put it officially. Other things happening. Oh, this coming week, the schedule.
Wednesday, November 1st, Donald Trump Jr. on the witness stand. Thursday, November 2nd, Eric Trump on the witness stand. Friday, November 3rd, Ivanka Trump testifying against her daddy. Speaking of her daddy, Monday, November 6th, Donald Trump on the witness stand.
They're all being called as hostile witnesses by the prosecution, which is a lot different than being invited as a defense witness by the defense, where they can just say, Ivanka, you look great today. Is it true that you don't even really remember doing this one thing? No, it's going to be, Ivanka Trump, this date, you were doing this. And she'll have to say, yes. What's going to happen to Donald Trump? I think it might kill him. I think he might just have a heart attack. I think he's in such a rage already. He got driven totally crazy when Michael Cohen testified against him. How's he going to feel when all three of his kids are testifying and putting more and more nails in his coffin of freedom? I mean, this isn't a criminal case, so he's not going to go to jail because of this. But he's going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars, at least, is what it's starting to look like. And he keeps saying, I'm going to win this trial. You already lost this trial. This isn't a trial judging whether or not you're guilty of these crimes, although they're not being issued as crimes. This is a civil court hearing. But the only reason for this hearing is to figure out how much disgorgement, because you engorged yourself, and we're going to disgorge you of all this money that you attained fraudulently. How much money do you owe the taxpayers of New York, the state of New York? It's basically how much money did you get fraudulently? Did you attain fraudulently? And they're only talking about the last 10 years, I believe, or a 10-year period of time. It's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more. What if you had to pay everything that you engorged yourself fraudulently with for the last 40 years? You know, your whole business career, if you want to call it that. So, yeah, that's going to be fun to watch. Of course, we can't watch it because there are no cameras in the room, but a lot of live tweeting from people who are doing a good job of covering this. Trump probably coming out in the hallway, losing his mind.
I don't know who she is, this blonde woman. She looks great, though. If I should date her, but I don't know who she is.
Sir, she's your daughter.
What? No, I don't think so. I've never seen her. She's a liar and a thug.
Well, he's moving his hands, like he's got an accordion in him.
I don't know who she is.
Anyway, it's almost time for a break. I do need to mention something that has really been bugging me. As a matter of fact, I usually record on Saturdays now, and I couldn't even record yesterday because I was just so bummed out and pissed off about my friend Dean Phillips making a complete fool of himself. I may or may not do a special edition that, might be relatively short, like 10 minutes or something. The way he announced, he used John F. Kennedy's words when John F. Kennedy announced he was running for the presidency, but he did it in front of a new bus of his outdoors with a 10-inch distorted speaker, which what it sounded like was maybe 20 people standing around kind of clapping a little bit. It's a presidential run. He's had bigger kickoffs of his congressional run here in Minnesota. Anyway, I just can't tell you how disappointed I am that he's doing this, and I have been defending him to a lot of people because he really is one of the best people I will ever meet. He's a really, really great guy, but I can't defend him anymore. This is just absurd. His campaign manager is a Republican. Anyway, I don't want to give it too much. If I do, I'm going to do a separate special edition. And the reason I don't want to give it too much attention is because I don't want it to get too much attention. And it's looking like that's the trajectory it's going to be on. The media seems to be ignoring it. I think rightfully so. It's not going to go anywhere. Ken Martin, the DFL, the Democratic chairman here in Minnesota, said he's disappointed in Phillips for running a hopeless campaign against Biden instead of backing the president against Trump. He's not going to end up finding the support that he needs, Martin said. I think it'll be like a cold glass of water thrown in his face. Very aptly put. There's even a leader in the DFL party here in CD3 said to me that this person doesn't even think that Dean can come back and run for re-election for his congressional seat because that's how pissed off we are. I wrote Dean a message, I don't know, through Facebook or something, just personally telling him to keep his chin up, a month, 6 weeks ago or something, when he stepped down from the chairmanship or the vice chairmanship on a committee in Congress that he's on, because it sounded like he got spanked pretty hard for talking about this presidential run and that Biden is too old. And it sounded like he was being punished. And his political communications director, I talked to him in D.C. at the same time I was, hanging out with Dean. And Dean was asked, "Are you going to run for president?" And he said, "I don't like to talk about it in this building," because we were in the Capitol building. He said, "But it's not looking likely." His political communications guy said to me and Heidi, "Yeah, I think everybody will forget about this when it comes time for re-election next summer." That was 1 month ago. That was only 1 month ago. Then he did this. I only found out about it on Thursday. I told Dean, "Don't worry, us here in CD3 will still support you." But that has changed. That has changed. This was a colossal and very dumb mistake. Apparently on his bus it says it's time for a change. Are you kidding me? We got our change in President Biden, and you're poozing out already? Yeah, I said I wasn't going to talk about this. I'm holding way back. If I sound angry at Dean Phillips, keep in mind, I am holding way back. Dean, I still consider you a really great guy and a friend, but this was really a bad mistake, a very, very bad mistake. And I don't know. I'm very disappointed. I feel betrayed, and I'm really angry about it. Let's take a break. When we come back, there are some really interesting, good news going on. And I also we'll have a little bit of fun reading part of Cassidy Hutchinson's book when we return on A Satellite View. You're enjoying the original Todd Mikkelson music that you hear on this show. Go to toddmikkelson.com, press the music link, and you can find this music and much more. Well, Neil Katyal thinks that Trump is going to end up in jail. Neil Katyal being a very high-standing lawyer. He talks on MSNBC a lot. He said, a judge is going to have to confront the ultimate question. Are we going to put the former president in jail? And I think there's only one answer to that, which is you have to. If he continues this behavior, you have to. Things are going to get very interesting in the weeks to come, starting with
the week of the Trump On trial. The whole family reunion.
The wife of newly elected House Speaker MAGA Mike Johnson runs a counseling business that advocates the belief that homosexuality is comparable to bestiality and incest, according to its own operating documents. This guy is a freak. This guy is a freak. He wants to outlaw homosexuality, not even gay marriage, just being gay at all. He wants to criminalize it. He has said that he believes you deserve hard labor. He wants to make the Don't Say Gay law that happened in Florida, he wants to make it national. And now, of course, there are rumors, I have no idea, but I'm seeing it more and more, rumors that he himself is gay. Now, of course, we've seen many times that these guys who seem to be on a crusade and they get themselves elected so that they can try and outlaw homosexuality, it's because, I don't know, they're jealous of gay guys who aren't afraid to come out and be themselves because they themselves are suppressed gay men. It's happened many times. I'm just saying. And I got no problem with him being gay, but I have a huge problem with him trying to outlaw homosexuality in this country. So get out. Get out of my government. By the way, Dean Phillips, here's a clip of a Republican man. Here's what he has to say.
Is there any chance you would stay at home on Election Day?
No. I love American democracy too much that Biden and Trump, if it's a Biden and Trump race, then I would vote for Biden even if he was dead. And I'm a Republican.
Yeah. Those are some headlines I'm kind of looking at. Another thing about MAGA Mike. This is written by Capitol Hunters. Dear news media, discovering now that our new House Speaker Mike Johnson has, just today, this was on the 27th, deleted his podcast webpage. All the podcasts are saved and archived because we figured this would happen. David Korn says, I had started listening to some of these podcasts. It was clear that they revealed Mike Johnson's biblical worldview that is not in sync with the views of most Americans. So he covers it in something that he wrote. So when this guy became Speaker of the House, he deleted his podcast website. Apparently he had a podcast called Truth Be Told. He's trying to cover up who he is in many ways. Yeah, a lot to say about him. We could spend the whole rest of the time. Instead, let's finally take a look at some stories from the Cassidy Hutchinson book entitled Enough. I read it very quickly because it's very riveting. I couldn't put it down. Here's one story. We had 2 rallies in Arizona that day. So this is during the 2020 campaign with Trump. And she's traveling around because she is basically the deputy chief of staff. She's immediately under Mark Meadows. So she goes everywhere Mark Meadows goes, and Mark Meadows is supposed to go everywhere Donald Trump goes. It's revealed in this book that many times Mark Meadows did not go where Trump was going, and he sent her in place of him. So Mark Meadows didn't even do his job. Mark Meadows knew that Trump would be really mad. Mark Meadows was basically like, I don't want to tell him that. He's just going to get mad at me, you know. At this rally, they knew that they had to get back to Las Vegas, and they just had, she says here, we lost electricity on Air Force One, which I couldn't recall ever happening before. I didn't think much of it, but not long into the president's speech, we received word that there were mechanical errors that might not be fixed in time for our departure. When Mark learned that we would have to motorcade back to Vegas, he erupted. Because he was afraid of sitting in a limousine with Donald Trump. I think she said they were about an hour and a half away. He didn't want to sit in the car with Trump that long. So he got really mad and he started to throw a tantrum. The Secret Service interrupted his tantrum to tell him that there was an unidentified aircraft flying over the rally. Word had been sent to the unknown pilot to leave the area immediately. If they didn't comply, the military might have to shoot them down. Mark erupted again and then began scrambling with the agents to find a way to let the president know what was going on. I told him that if they typed a message for the president on his teleprompter, he would likely read it out loud. So all these guys are like, we got to tell the president that there's an airplane flying illegally over this rally, and we don't know if it's hostile. We don't know if it could be an assassination attempt. And they're saying, how do we tell the president? How do we get him off the podium? He's in the middle of his speech. And then somebody says, well, why don't we just type it on his teleprompter? And it takes Cassidy Hutchinson, in seemingly the only person with half a brain, takes Cassidy Hutchinson to realize that if you put it on his teleprompter, he's going to read it as part of his speech because he's such an idiot.
Anyway, they say it's very bad, people coming into this country, illegal, they're jihad, they hate Biden and they want to come and it didn't happen when I was president. There's an airplane flying over us right now threatening the president's life, and we should all...
Oh my God. I thought that story was quite hilarious. Here's a story that involves Ron DeSantis. This is Cassidy Hutchinson writing, I woke up the next morning to several messages from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Okay, this was right before a rally in Florida. So I woke up the next morning to several messages from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis urging me to make sure he and the First Lady, his wife Casey, were mentioned in the president's remarks at a rally in Tampa that day. I had known Ron since I was an intern for Scalise, and Ron was in his third and final term in the House. I ignored his texts. Ron texted Mark and me all the time. I had repeatedly asked him to stop, but he disregarded me. That's who Ron DeSantis is. Mark got out of his vehicle before I got out of mine, and it took me a few minutes to catch up to him. When I did, he told me to find Ron DeSantis. Ron had found Mark, but Mark had told him I would handle whatever he needed, that he had other things to do. I found Ron and Casey, because, again, Mark Meadows can't do his job, so he has Cassidy Hutchinson do it for him. I found Ron DeSantis and his wife Casey. He asked if Trump was going to mention him in the remarks, and if so, how many times? I lost my temper. I told him that he had to learn boundaries. He started to apologize like a child who'd been caught misbehaving, but I walked away. Ron DeSantis. Another one, when the staff began to deplane, we climbed back down and made our way off stage. So this is at another rally. A senior campaign official jabbed his finger into my shoulder. Alarmed, I spun around. Chief's still on the plane talking to the boss. That means Mark Meadows is talking to Donald Trump. He's going to meet up with Tony Bubalinsky. Can you go get him? Oh, Cassidy writes, I took a step back and crossed my arms. What do you mean? I said gruffly. The boss asked him to meet up with Tony Bubalinsky. He's here. So she's being told to find a meeting place for Mark Meadows and this guy Bubalinsky. She goes on to write, I didn't know much about Tony Bubalinsky, just that he was a former business associate of Hunter Biden's and had something to do with the laptop controversy. Cassidy Hutchinson is saying, Mark should not do this. He's being set up. So she goes up to Mark Meadows and goes, you're not meeting Tony Bubalinsky here, Mark. We can send somebody from the campaign. Please, Mark, this is not a good idea. Just trust me. Mark looked at the Secret Service agent, then back at me. He said, just go find him and work with Secret Service to find a hidden spot. Come and get me once you've done that. So she has Secret Service encircle 4 of their vehicles. They were pissed about doing that, and she said, you got to do it. You know, you want me to get your boss and have him tell you to do it? This is what the president wants. It's a little weird how it's described, but there's like a little house, kind of, or a small shed that's got a fence around it. She's told that that's where this Bubalinsky is. So, no, she's walking with a guy named Brian. There, Brian said, and pointed to the little house. I don't want to talk to him, I told him. As 3 men came out of the house, I tried to pick out Tony Bubalinsky, but they were all wearing hats and ski masks. Brian introduced himself and explained that we would bring him to the chief. I spun around and started pushing through the crowd to make a path for the group a good distance behind me. I made it to the security perimeter before the rest of the group, telling the campaign staffer to let Brian, Jack, and his guests through when they caught up. The staffer said he could lose his job if he let people in without proper credentials. So Cassidy Hutchinson says, "You'll lose your job if you don't let them through. I promise you that." And she goes on, "I rounded the corner and saw Mark talking to a campaign staff. They all looked in my direction at the same time. As Mark broke away, one of the staffers patted his shoulder. Mark smiled and flashed a thumbs up in their direction. She tries to urge him again. "This is really stupid of you, Mark. I don't know what's going on, but it's really stupid." He didn't have time to respond as I ushered him into the makeshift area of the 4 Secret Service cars. So he meets with this guy. For some reason, this guy and his cohorts have ski masks and hats on? What in the hell? And they're talking about the Hunter Biden laptop scandal. This is in the summer, late summer of the 2020 campaign. Here's then way later. This is after she has now gotten out of Trump world, but she's really scared. And she's meeting with Liz Cheney. She has a different lawyer now this time. Her own lawyers that ended up working pro bono for her because she couldn't afford it. But that's how important these lawyers thought it was. So now she writes, "Several months later, I would tell Liz Cheney that I had felt that day as if Donald Trump were looking over my shoulder." This is when she signed on to her new lawyers. Her old lawyer, a Trump guy, had planted the seeds of old allegiances with his reference to my loyalty. This is what he basically said. "We know you're loyal. We know you're on Team Trump. We know you're going to do the right thing. We're going to take care of you." Phrases I had heard throughout my tenure in the White House. Phrases I had spent a year trying to separate myself from.
We know you're loyal. We know you're on the side of me, the Don. We know you're going to do the right thing. We're going to take care of you, Michael. We're going to take care of you, Cassidy.
Yeah, anyway, it's a Cassidy Hutchinson book called Enough. Highly recommended. Very fun to read. A lot of crazy stories in it. I want to quickly talk about something that happened in an appellate court, a court of appeals. There was a guy, Thomas Robertson, an ex-cop, broke into the Capitol on January 6th. He was sentenced to 87 months, which is a little more than 7 years in prison. He appealed that decision because he was sentenced for obstruction of Congress. And in the definition of that statute, of that criminal statute, within obstruction of Congress, it says corruptly, if you do something corruptly. So Thomas Robertson's lawyers were questioning the use of the word corruptly. So they were trying to appeal the sentence, trying to get obstruction of Congress thrown out, basically. When the prosecution needs to prosecute, they have to prosecute you of an already existing crime. So they need to find a criminal statute that already exists. They can't just make up a new one. They can't say, "Hey, we're charging you with rushing into the Capitol with a stick," because there's no law that says you can't rush into the Capitol with a stick. So they got to find an existing criminal statute. They went with obstruction of Congress, and this guy appealed it like a year ago. And DOJ has been sitting on eggshells over this because there were an awful lot of people that were prosecuted under the charge of obstruction of Congress. And if the appellate court decided, yeah, this guy Thomas Robertson is correct, the judge ruled wrong. The judge should not have convicted him of obstruction of Congress. And all of those cases, many, many cases, hundreds of cases would then have to get thrown out. And the whole January 6th thing would be a huge mess. What, over 1,000 people, 1,200 people or something have been convicted? You know, maybe 1,000 of those with this one ruling getting thrown out? Well, the Court of Appeals in a 2-1 decision said, yes, this is correct. The judge was correct. Thomas Robertson, you stand continuously convicted of obstruction of Congress, and yes, you have to go to jail for 7 years. His lawyers were trying to say he didn't do this corruptly because he was being honest. He really believed there was fraud in the 2020 election. Therefore, it was just fine for him to break into the Capitol, use a stick and bear spray and pepper spray against his fellow policemen, because he's a cop himself. They said it was okay for him to do that. He thought he was in the right. He honestly thought he was doing the right thing when he used a stick and pepper spray against Capitol policemen after he broke into the Capitol. They said he shouldn't be punished for that because he thought. So, yeah. The appellate court said, no, that's... So they basically have to make a new ruling. And now there is established precedent in the D.C. Court of Appeals, which means other appellate courts and all trial lawyers and judges can now abide by this new established precedent. So all of those people will remain convicted of obstruction of Congress. Very good news. I didn't even know this was going on, but DOJ was very nervous about this for the last year, waiting for this appeals court decision. Wow. Very, very good news. And I think we're going to have to stop it there. We're way over time, but this was a more fun one. Am I correct? Yeah, I think so, except for the Dean part. Still, I don't know. I'll see if I do a special edition. I don't know. Keep your eyes out on the page here to see if I come out with the special edition about Dean Phillips. I'm telling you, I might not do it because I don't even want to give it too much attention. And all I would be revealing is really how angry I am about it and how much of a fool I think he's being and looking like to a national crowd. Yeah, I'm not going to go into it any more than that. Anyway, this was fun. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
You've been listening to A Satellite View with Todd Mikkelson. Go to toddmikkelson.com for links and more information.